a Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I had the opportunity to sit down with one of Australia's leading architects, Luke Fry. Luke has a thriving, young and energetic practice, and as you'll get to hear, he's also a registered building practitioner. Luke and his team are doing wonderful things, including being selected by his peers to be a judge on national television, and he's also gone on to design award-winning building designs and projects in some of Australia's most amazing landscapes and environments. In our chat, Luke shares some insights into what a leading architect looks for in a builder and what it takes to equally be an award-winning builder, building amazing projects for a design architect. This week's episode was a very privileged and insightful chat, so let's get into it. Luke from Luke Fry Architecture, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Now, like always, we always like to go back in time. So whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in country Victoria in a family of builders. My dad's a builder, my brother's a builder. Yeah, so I was always sort of born and raised on building sites, really.
So you were pretty well destined from a young age to have some sort of influence in construction, I guess.
Yeah, that's I think probably always, there was always the dream for my dad. Thankfully, my brother took that path and he's sort of thrived and taken over the family business. So I got off the hook.
Well, it's a good mix to have, isn't it? Especially a family of builders. It's always handy to have a handy architect in the family.
Yeah. Well, I think I was kind of a blend of my mum and dad. My mum's quite creative, so I sort of took the best of both of them and ended up where I am today.
So what was your childhood like? Like, was it classic sort of farm growing up, sort of community living, that sort of thing?
It wasn't on a farm. It was always in town. It was sort of pretty, I guess, nomadic in a way. My parents were constantly building new houses and selling them and moving on, and that was a way that they could obviously, earn an extra income and all those sorts of things. But I lived at home until I was 17 when I finished school and went to uni, and in that time frame I lived in 12 brand new houses in 17 years. So we were constantly moving around. It was all in the same town though, which was good. A couple of times we even moved in the same street.
So you're always around that constant renovating and value adding and
it was
creating spaces.
All the time, yeah. And I think that constant level of movement and constant sort of action throughout life is sort of ingrained into me now. I can't sit still for too long. If I don't have something in front of me, I go insane. Yeah.
That's that creativity coming through, isn't it, really? Just, always being busy and...
Yeah, it's always looking for that next thing. It's kind of the challenge, though, of trying not to get sidetracked and focusing on what you've got currently in front of you before worrying about that next thing. But it keeps me inspired.
What was school life like for you? Were you like a practical kid or a bit of both? Like, were you ever going to be a tradie, or were you sort of looking at life after school in terms of education?
Yeah, I probably wasn't going to ever be a tradie. I spent a lot of time on site with my dad, working in school holidays and things like that. But there were times when I'd have a great day and I'd really enjoy it and think, I could do this. And then there were other days where I wasn't in love with it, and ultimately it just wasn't right for me. Those days usually happened in winter, funnily enough.
For sure.
when it was freezing. But school was good. It seems like a long time ago now. I had a good bunch of mates. I had a good childhood. I can't complain. Yeah.
So what did you do after school then? What were you aiming to do?
Like I said before, I moved out of home at 17. I was young for my year level in school, so still couldn't even drive when I moved out of home. I turned 18 not long after that, but it was still pretty young to be, moving away and studying and that sort of thing. But that was always on the cards. Initially, when I graduated, I wanted to become a graphic designer. So that's what I applied for at university.
That was your first choice?
That was my first choice. And that course was full and they couldn't put me into it. So they offered me a position in interior design. And the structure of the university was that in first year, all of the design courses did the same sort of format. So you got a taste of multiple different disciplines. And then at the end of first year, you decided which direction you sort of wanted to take. So they sort of sold me on that, and I enrolled in interior design with the intention of transferring to graphics at the end of first year. And then after a while, I was starting to enjoy it, and obviously, given my childhood, I was around it a lot anyway. And then I just started thinking about architecture and all that sort of thing. And there was another guy in interior design as well that was sort of in a similar boat. He ended up leaving at that point and going straight to architecture. But I sort of worked out that if for an extra year of study, I could do interior design and then go on to architecture. So I spent 8 years at uni in total. I finished off interiors, then went straight into architecture. Didn't give graphics another thought after that, and I was just at home.
It sounds like such a long time, 8 years, but doesn't it go so quickly?
It does. I was 25, 26 when I graduated. It does seem like forever ago. A lot of life has happened between then. Yeah, I mean, life was enjoyable back then, you know. You don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids.
It's a lot easier.
You go to the pub every weekend. You know, it's good. You're just doing what you love doing and learning along the way and navigating through life and, you know, traveling and doing all that stuff.
So once you graduated, you set your mind on sort of taking that architecture pathway?
Yeah. So I was already working full-time as an interior designer while I was studying architecture. And then I did my master's in architecture full time. I didn't work while I did that. Then after that, I was really straight into it. I obviously got that experience while I was studying, but I worked for a couple of years after graduating architecture in two different practices, some pretty big names, which was great. You know, I learnt from some of the best, and then I just always had that intention of doing my own thing. Probably wasn't much that was going to get in my way to stop that from happening. I got an opportunity from a friend to design a penthouse, which was an awesome project, and it was enough to sort of take the leap. I was renovating my own house at the time, so that first year of business was not really all that serious, to be completely honest, because I was sort of doing a project for a friend, so it was quite relaxed, and renovating my own house at the same time. So that's where it started, and then I didn't really have too many sort of preconceived ideas at that point. I just sort of thought, well, it's a good opportunity. If it doesn't work out, I can always go back and get another job.
See, that's what I love about this podcast, is hearing stories like that, because I'm always fascinated in what structure was in place or what systems you had in place or the connections that you had. Whereas when you skin it all back, it was just that opportunistic outlook, that positive creative mind, and you start to attract that sort of energy back, and suddenly opportunities emerge and you get that momentum.
Well, that's exactly right. There were no structures in place. There was no real plan. It was just sort of taking the opportunity that was in front of me, seeing what happened, and then another one came along and another one, and it grew from there. And
from predominantly word of mouth referral back then.
Initially, yeah, and then once I could sort of see that there was a future in it, obviously you start investing into generating business in other ways, of course. You're not always relying on that word of mouth, but, it was one friend, another friend, and then, you get some projects completed, someone sees it and it's published, or it's in a magazine or on a blog or whatever, and someone else calls and it continues to snowball. Before you know it, you got 6 staff and, you're looking for the next big thing.
How do you take that step from knowing this is me and then now I need to grow my firm and build up my practice some more?
It comes from sort of pretty organic growth, really. It doesn't sort of happen overnight where you're reliant on getting projects and getting clients and all of those sorts of things. And projects take such a long time that it's not sort of extremely instant.
It's not fast paced, is it?
No, the growth is very slow. It's very slow in the scheme of things when you compare it to other industries.
Well, you think about, I guess, you're designing a project, something like 70% of projects actually come to life, throwing a statistic out there.
Yep.
So 30% of projects don't actually ever get built. So if you're a solo practitioner and you're designing something, like you could take 2 years, sometimes 3 years before something gets built and finished, that you can leapfrog from that and market it.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I think the challenge that we're finding currently is that when we do get a project completed and photographed and published and all that sort of thing now, and it does seem appealing to somebody and they call and make an inquiry, we almost need to educate them in a way that was designed 4 years ago. And
it's in the past.
I'm
It's
no longer
old.
interested in that. But to them, that's new. But we're sort of, what we've got on our drawing board currently is sort of very different to what's on the website, if that makes sense. There's always a lag.
I think that's a really interesting point, and you're so right that you're constantly evolving and coming from the arts, being architecture, you're, I guess, striving to create something that's new and energetic as opposed to dealing with, but I love this job. Like you said, there's that tension of, been there, done that. This is what I want to bring to life now.
To continuously be inspired and have that energy to get out of bed every morning and put in those hours, for me at least, I need to be doing new things. So I don't really want to repeat the same thing twice. We've got obviously standard details and the way we detail a door jamb or whatever it may be that we know works and looks great and all that sort of thing. But ultimately each and every project is started with a blank slate. We don't try to carry over anything from another project or anything like that. We base it all on its own merits. And each and every project is different, even just through obvious things like site constraints and, budgets and likes and dislikes from the client. I don't really, want two projects to look the same or feel the same. It's, projects last for a long time. You want something fresh each and every time, really.
How do you handle that constant, I won't call it a revolving door, but how do you handle that constant, I guess, of trying to change and adapt? Like, is it an educational thing of being aware of materials and the environment of the space? How do you draw on that inspiration? Where does it come from?
It's a good question. I mean, we're as much fans of architecture and construction as anyone else. It's just we've got the beauty of living and breathing it and doing it every day. So we're inspired by everything else around us, just like you are. So we're seeing other projects, we're reading books, we're doing whatever anyone else does.
I think it's probably leadership. You're in a leadership position where you're able to lead and draw on that inspiration and actually put things in the pipeline and make decisions happen.
Well, that's exactly right as well. I mean, we're lucky enough to be at the forefront where if we think something is worth implementing or whatever it may be, a new technology or a certain principle that should be adopted, we've got the very privileged position of being able to drive that and make that part of our everyday lives.
You mentioned before about growing your practice. What's that feeling like when you've been inundated with fresh work and new inquiries? Like, what's that feeling like of the phone non-stop ringing and these inquiries are coming through the door and they love your work and they want you part of their dream? What's that feeling like?
It's flattering, to be honest, like to think that you've inspired somebody enough and they love your work enough for them to pick up the phone and make an inquiry themselves it's an awesome feeling. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does, it feels good. I think any business owner can they can relate to the thrill of the hunt, if you like, in generating new business and all that sort of thing. I guess one challenge that I've found throughout business so far is, and this is sort of looking at a project from an architect's point of view, a lot of the time before we get on board, the project doesn't really exist, especially when you're dealing with private residential work, for example, when you're trying to attract a potential client that's their mums and dads or families or whoever. You can't just pick up the phone and call them, and like you can if you're doing commercial work, for example, or in other industries where it's a business to business transaction. It's a business to customer transaction. So you've kind of got to put out good work and good energy and try and attract people to come to you in that respect. And when they do, it's good because a lot of the time you're shooting in the dark.
How do you handle that process where people want Luke Fry, the architect, and you've now got a well-established firm in Melbourne and you're doing some incredibly diverse and amazing projects. So how do you balance that? If I'm an architect listening to this or any small business owner and it's in a creative field like you are, how do you handle that?
It's a good question. It hasn't been too difficult, to be honest, until recently. And as we continue to grow and get bigger and get more projects and the projects themselves get bigger as well, we've been able to manage it. Now it's starting to become a bit more challenging. But I've got good mentors and good support in place. And I think that's critical. But we're looking at, ways to make that happen as much as we can. I think ultimately any architect that runs their own business really started from the point of view of them being a good designer. I don't think anyone really starts a practice going, I'm really good at contract admin. I'm going to go and start my own business. So ultimately I think most directors of architecture firms are good designers and they're designers at heart. So naturally the client wants them. That's amplified, I think, even further when your name's on the door. So
yes,
that's a decision that I think I probably underestimated initially. Whether you name your practice with your own name or you give it a generic name, and it's probably ego. It's more than anything that puts your name on the door.
But it's nice too because you also are forced to constantly inject your business with Luke Fry DNA. It's Luke Fry DNA, and the business will develop its own personality as well, but equally you're the one driving the values of your business and the direction.
Well, yeah, ultimately, I mean, you live and die by the sword kind of thing. It is your name on the door. It is your brand, and there's some positives that come with that, but there's also all of the responsibility and the negatives too. You weigh them up equally.
Now, if I'm a builder and I'm listening to this and I think I would love to become my own brand and equally build your amazing projects designed by Luke Fry, architecture and interiors, and I want to have the privilege of working on those projects, what does an architect in your position look for?
Ultimately, firstly, I would look for passion more than anything, because I think the nature of the projects that we produce are not just slapped together. It needs to be approached with something outside of the box or a level of energy that's needed to get them built to a certain level. I don't think that is every builder out there.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Some builders, they're not up for that
Yeah.
part of the market.
I think a lot of builders maybe think the idea of working with architects is great. I'm not sure on the reality of it really, because it's hard work. There's a lot of there's not only a lot of detail to it and all that sort of thing, but there's a lot of passion behind it, and not only from the architect but from the client as well, because the client goes to the architect in the first place because they want something unique and special. And these projects, they're not cookie cutter buildings. They're prototypes each and every time in their own right. If you're exploring something new, it might be an overall concept or just a individual detail. There's a lot of instances where that hasn't been done before, and you've got to work it out. And you're either up for that or you're not, because sometimes there's not always a commercial reality to that, I guess, from our point of view, or the builders, but you do it for the sake of the project and the interest that it brings to your life. I think it's certainly not based on a commercial return, is it? It's a certain recognition, and I think it's energy, like you mentioned before. You're a part of that energy and that momentum, and it's a tough environment. You're dealing with tough expectations for a reason too. Yeah, I think the expectations are certainly getting higher from what I've seen, and I haven't been in the industry for as long as many others, but I think just the likes of TV shows that we see these days and all that sort of thing, it portrays this idea of perfection and instantaneous, and I think that's the world we live in as well, where it's very instant sort of gratification type of world. But the nature of what we're producing is just not like that. It takes time, it takes energy. Some of the greatest buildings in the world that we look back on now, they took years, like decades even to build. And now, if something's not done in under a year, it's a failure. But I think we've got to realise that these projects are bigger than us. And it's that idea of leaving a legacy that I think helps to fuel that fire, where you're building something that'll outlive us, outlive our kids. It's going to be there for a very long time. And I think there's a real level of responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah, you certainly can't go into building your type of projects with having, I guess, that closed mind on, I've been doing this for a certain way for a period of time, and you need to be constantly open to new products, new methods, new systems, new input, perspectives, like the whole lot. So it takes a lot of energy, but it's there for a reason. Yeah,
I think just that ability to constantly move forward is what it's all about. Constantly trying to improve and refine and create a better product at the end of the day, a better building.
Now, you mentioned before about recognition, and I think one of the greatest achievement in any person's career is having recognition. You've been recognised and rewarded to be a judge. So
yes.
So tell us about that one.
Well, it's something that I certainly wasn't seeking. It came about from a friend that was chatting to the producer of that TV show, and he said to him, I'm doing a new TV show, here's the concept, do you know any architects that would be suitable? And I'd had lunch with this friend the week before, so I was probably at the forefront of his mind, and he said, actually, I do know someone. And I got a text message and said, I've just put you forward for a TV show, expect a phone call tomorrow.
That's incredible.
And I just thought, whatever at the time, not expecting
no expectations.
Anything, nothing. And then the next day the phone rings and it went from there. So look, it was fun, if anything. It was a great bunch of people doing something different, and, we just had a good time.
Look, it's a great show, and I think allowing anyone the opportunity to express their opinion in a recognised environment and having that ability to provide that different perspective, even amongst our own peers, it's a great recognition.
Yeah.
For all that hard work and being at uni for 8 years and like all of it really. Now, what about that house? So Torquay, tell us about that. It's a wonderful project.
It's a good house. I love it. It's the first one we did on the coast in a coastal environment, if you like. It's actually my in-laws' house.
Well, there you go.
So
a well-kept secret.
There's always those challenges of working with family. I think, what's the saying? You don't work with family or friends.
That's right.
But no, it was great, and the outcome was good. As with any project, learning lessons along the way. I thankfully get to enjoy it more than any other project that we've ever done because I get to visit. So
you get to watch it age and mature in that coastal environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of our landmark projects, amongst others, and coastal homes are more of we want to be doing more of them, as well as homes in the country and things like that. As much as we love inner city properties, looking at our projects in terms of the lifestyle that they bring to the client, and the memories that are built there, and the way that they live in those houses are part of what we're really interested in. Where what we're offering a client is not just a set of drawings and some advice along the way. What we're actually offering them is a lifestyle at the end.
Yeah, look, I love that because I think it's one thing to be able to, I guess, put pen to paper, come up with a creative concept, hold the client's hand through that journey and the entire process, and then to see it deliver right until turnkey.
Yep.
It must be such a wonderful feeling to finally get there at the end and see all that come together.
Yeah, well, it's a long road to get there.
It is, isn't it?
Like,
It's just incredible, isn't it, to actually imagine that when someone comes in with an inquiry and they've handpicked Luke Fry for my coastal or country retreat, it could be minimum, 2 years?
At least.
At least.
And you want to make sure you've got a good working relationship between client and architect, because it's a long time. And the same with the builder. That's no different. Ultimately, I think just as human beings, we want to be working with people that we really like and get along with, and, we've got the same mutual goal ahead of us. And that's when, that's how they're made.
What's in at the moment that you're absolutely in love with in terms of a product or a feature in a house? Or do you put like a little signature piece? Is there something that just stands out that you just love doing on a home, or it doesn't work like that? It's like, no, this is specific to its environment.
We try to keep it as unique and individual as we can. Each and every project is, looked at it from its own merits. But we're doing some interesting stuff at the moment. One thing that comes to mind is we're working on a house where we've done a fully custom hand-built bathtub on site that is completely rendered inside and out. So I'd imagine the texture of having a bath. Yeah. It'd be pretty amazing. Yeah, and the bath sort of that render runs seamlessly up the wall, and it's going to be a very cool effect. But just the challenges of that, from a waterproofing point of view, as you can probably imagine, and just getting it to build correctly, is challenging and something interesting. But I think like I said before, you've got to have the right builder on board for something like that. That's up for the challenge.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to the puzzle, isn't there? I think it's important to also have that, like you said, the right builder, so that it's not a challenge. It's like, well, yeah, no worries, Luke. We'll see what we can come up with. I'll talk to my renderer or waterproofer or tiler, whoever it might be.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that I learnt early on from my dad, really, is that the right tradespeople will have really valuable input into a process, and they'll always be able to say, well, have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it that way? And while the idea might come from the architect originally, I think there's valuable input to be had along the way. And I guess one thing that I've always tried to do is to tap into those skills and that experience of the tradespeople on site. Because chances are they've done it before or seen something similar before, or they know why something wouldn't work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more with that. And it's the power of just asking the question or having a conversation.
Yeah.
Rather than shooting an email. The difference between shooting an email that might sit there for 2 days and turns into I'll just reply because I have to, versus picking up the phone and saying g'day and having a good old-fashioned conversation. Someone who knows could say, look, yeah, I know such and such, and he's just had this bath put in down the road, and yeah, he's the guy to talk to.
Yeah, and it goes from there. It's I think it's really good when you're able to share knowledge and, I guess work towards that common goal.
Okay, so when Luke Fry's not designing incredible masterpieces, what do you like to do outside of work?
Outside of work, at the moment I've got my hands full with family, but I've got 2 little kids. We're about to start building our own house.
There's a test, isn't there? An architect's own home.
Yeah, I'm the worst client ever. My staff love me for that. But yeah, that's going to be a big part of our year this year, and that'll obviously go into next year.
I bet that's a good test then for anyone who's a builder building the architect's own home.
Yeah, I think it's with a young guy, Dom Ravisi. he's just got a brilliant attitude towards life. And we've done some projects together. We got introduced through work. He's become a good friend. We're looking forward to just building it together and working through all the details and doing all that sort of thing. But I think he knows what he's in for.
No pressure.
Yeah. So, look, other than that, keeping fit and healthy is very high on the agenda. Enjoying everything Melbourne's got to offer. Travelling, all of the usual things, no different to anyone else really, just trying to enjoy life.
Do you ever go back to the country often to sort of revisit it?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents still live there. My brother lives there. I've got a free holiday house. Anytime I need a break from Melbourne, I can just head up and spend the weekend with them and get some fresh country air, which is good.
Now, you mentioned mentors before.
Yep.
So is there anyone that you speak to or network with or interact with regularly when you're sort of puzzled or thinking about any sort of strategic business decisions?
Yep. I've got a few mentors, some that have come about just, I think, organically through friendships. Some guys that have been around the block many, many times and have been so generous with their time and interest in what I'm doing that they just want to be involved and help out and give back. So they're amazing. And then I've got another business consultancy that I engage with that's sort of an investment really into business. And
that's more of a formal structure.
Exactly. That's more of a formal structure where, they advise us on all sorts of aspects of business, whether it be financial, whether it be, HR related or marketing or whatever it is. I think having multiple people to go to for multiple different things is important. Everyone's got an opinion, and sometimes I think it takes speaking to 2 or 3 people to be able to form your own, before you want to make that decision.
Yeah, look, I talk about it all the time. I'm regularly involved in that. And one of the, I guess, perspectives I provide is that if you have a set agenda or if you have a specific person that you talk to, life throws curveballs all the time, and particularly in construction and architecture, nothing is always the same. There's so many constants and so many variables equally. So it's so important to recognise that, and once you do let go of that there is no set agenda, and it could be a weather problem, it could be a financial problem, it could be a personality problem. There's just so many different variables in construction and design. Putting it all together, it's more often than not going to produce some sort of unknown and uncertainty. So I think what you said is 100% accurate, where you have someone for these sorts of problems, have someone else for business or strategy type problems. You just go between the mix and ask the right people.
Absolutely. I think you've just got to have that network around you. You're not supposed to know it all. Nobody does, I don't think. I guess at least from a university point of view or an apprenticeship point of view, whatever that may be, you sort of learnt the skills of the job itself, but all of that kind of goes out the window once you start running your own business, because the success of your business is not always to do with your technical skills. It's all the things that you're not taught that I think come into play, making smart decisions and managing a sticky situation well. And we never always get that right, but I think the intent is to do our very best and do what's right for everyone involved.
One of the things that I've always wanted to ask a very prominent architect is, considering it's 2021, there's all sorts of software and programs to use, what are the fundamental design sort of characteristics that you come back to in this day and age with designing something? Is it like Pinterest? Is it baking paper, still, sketching? Is it CAD from the get-go? Like, what is it? What do you see in that space?
I think initially it's by hand.
Still drawing sketches.
I think just the free flow of, drawing by hand, where there's kind of no limitations. you're only limited by your imagination, really. You're not limited by a program that you're using or how long it might take to flesh out an idea, if you like. I wish I could sketch all day long. Unfortunately, I can't. But
yeah, look, I love it.
Yeah,
because it's a nice thing to be able to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's no sort of right or wrong. You know, a sketch can be one thing. It can mean one thing to you one day and another thing to you another day. Of course, we rely on technology, and that's ultimately where it ends up once it gets into Revit, and we're documenting. But early days in a process, I would always put my hand up for a hand-drawn sketch to flesh it out.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's like it's true to the design core, really, like just being able to freehand and come up with something, because I don't use the software myself, but I know plenty of people that do, and I've been involved in many projects, and it's those angles, those shadows, those shades and different things like that you don't get from the get-go with software. It's just being able to explore those creative ideas.
Yeah, I just wish we got to do more of it, but unfortunately that doesn't always happen. But I mean, we also need to embrace the technology that we've got available to us today. I just think we don't need to let it take over. Learning to manage it and use it well is key.
All right, so what else is on the cards sort of moving forward with Luke Fry Architecture and your team?
We're looking to move into more of a multi-residential space.
So you're stepping up?
Trying to, looking to be challenged more than anything. I feel like we've been ready for it for a long time, but I think having the resources to be able to take on bigger projects is always a challenge. But ultimately, I mean, really what we want to be doing is getting a greater balance of projects across the board. So, more townhouses and more apartments are on the agenda for us. We've got the team in place to be taking those projects on. And ultimately, it's sort of the core of what we're producing still remains the same, where I was touching on earlier, what we're trying to produce is a lifestyle for our clients at the end of the day. And that transcends across, new homes, renovations, multi-residential, even commercial. If we're talking about a lifestyle that's lived for our 9 to 5 working day, that's equally as important.
Now, just on that, how much of an overlay is there with that working 9 till 5 in terms of now combining it with home? So you mentioned lifestyle. I'd imagine that's something that you're naturally exploring with combining residential spaces with a mix of workspace as well.
Yeah, it's a hot topic at the moment coming out of COVID, isn't it?
It is. And there's plenty of opinions out there about whether it's here to stay or whether it'll be back to normal.
That's right. I mean, if I'm honest, I've probably never been a huge advocate for working from home. I've always tried to keep those two spaces separate. And I think that's probably dependent on what industry you're in and each individual as well, how they feel comfortable and where they're most productive and all that sort of thing. But for me, I've always preferred to separate that and be in the studio for work and when I'm at home, I'm at home.
Yeah, I'd imagine also too, it's about keeping that creative mindset. So, you can't be creative 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's right,
You need to have a stop point and a reset. So I think it's equally important to, like you just mentioned, about juggling that, but making a strategic decision to say, well, that's my workspace and I'm in that mindset, and now I'm at home and it's my family time.
I think the benefits of working from home are probably potentially best answered by a psychologist more than anything. Like our homes currently, I don't think are designed well enough to accommodate it. And how that evolves moving into the future is, up for grabs. But ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily purely an environmental, as in built environment sort of question. It's probably got a lot to do with our mental health and, the way we manage that and our relationships and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think talking to a lot of people in the industry, it's kind of been a bit of an aftershock thought. Everyone was sort of talking about it for a long time, that flexibility with remote work and things like that. I think the facts are, if you're in a collaborative workplace environment where there's a certain structure in place, I think it's more about flexibility as opposed to I could equally be just as creative in my home space 4 days a week working from home, where in your business it's about getting together and throwing ideas around the office and the environment that you're working in, the vibe,
absolutely,
the noises, the sounds in the workplace, like all of those things.
Yeah, I think it does just come back to flexibility, not necessarily purely working from home, if that makes sense. It's almost working from wherever is best to be working from at that time. You know, if it needs to be at home, it's at home. If it needs to be, you know, in a cafe or if it's interstate or whatever that may be, or if it's just in the office, in the studio, because that's what's right at the time, then that's what needs to be done. Yeah, we've found it pretty challenging last year for those reasons, but I think I spent about 6 hours a day on Zoom, just talking.
Not engaging as such.
Yeah, not engaging, but it took 10 times longer to reach a resolution on things when you're not sitting in front of someone else.
Yeah, it's sort of not as productive as such.
Nowhere near. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I love hearing these different perspectives. It's been really nice to sit down and talk to you, and I really appreciate you coming on to Build Hatch. You and your team are doing some incredible projects around Melbourne and beyond. So
thank you. For
those that are listening to this and want to reach out and get you and your team on board with their project, what's the best way to go about it?
I think our Instagram and our website are pretty much the best way to get in touch with us. We put a fair bit of time and energy into it, trying to get our work out there, and we're always happy to, take that phone call and chat about interesting projects. We love what we do. It's part of who we are, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
All right, Luke. Like I said, it's been really nice to sit down and get to know you. And thanks again coming on to Build Hatch.
Thanks, Aaron. Cheers, mate.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Luke Fry from Luke Fry Architecture. Like always, I love getting a special insight into award-winning building practices from a leading architect's perspective. As usual, please check out our Instagram and other socials, including our YouTube channel, where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.